Hi, Monty.
Good morning.
I think we have to put a couple of slides for public participation, but I'm not sure if there's a way to get your presentation loaded up. But if you want to,
Can I try right now?
yeah, go for it. I think it's okay.
All right, you seeing this?
I'm seeing it, but I'm seeing your notes too. So I think.
Yeah, so give me a moment here.
Yep.
You still seeing my notes, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Now it's good. Now it's only the slide.
Yep. Okay. If that's okay, if I can just leave this up, or do I need to stop sharing and then sign back in?
I think you need to stop because I think Ashley has to share the public participation page.
Okay. All right.
Monty, I'm going to mute you until your presentation, okay?
Okay, thanks.
Ashley, are we good to go?
Yes, we are.
Awesome. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the public work to order. And first, if we could share ways to participate, Ashley, that would be great. And we continue to meet virtually for too much longer. You can find information on how to participate on the city's website. If you are wanting to leave comments for City Council, you can do that by either calling 406-552-6012 or emailing council@ci.missoula.mt.us. And all of these meetings are recorded, so access those via MCAT at your convenience. So with that, if we could get a roll call for attendance, Ashley, that'd be great.
Anderson. Becerra.
Present.
Carlino.
Present.
Contos.
Here.
Hess.
Present.
Jones. Jordan.
Present.
Nugent.
Here.
Savage.
Here.
Cheryl.
Present.
Vasica.
Present.
West.
Present.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. We have, I'm sorry, minutes from February 23rd to approve. Are there any changes to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, those will stand approved. We will go to our attendee list to see if anyone would like to provide public comment on items not on the agenda. And I see Ross is in the attendees. If we can promote him to panelist, please. Okay, no public comment to provide comment. We'll move to our only item on the agenda, and that is an informational presentation on our sidewalk program for the city of Missoula. And Monty and Jeremy will be tag teaming this presentation. Go ahead, Jeremy, Monty.
I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, thanks, Marta. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jeremy Keenum, the Director for Public Works and Mobility, and Monty Sipe is our Construction Projects Manager with our engineering group. We'll be talking about our sidewalk program this morning. Have some other staff on the call as well who can answer questions as we go along if you have any. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about our program a little bit. Next slide, please. This is just an opportunity for us to talk a little bit about what we're currently doing, what we've done in the past, a bit about our structure for funding sidewalks and the assessment process we use, looking at some current and proposed projects, and then talking about our budget and funding. We have a full hour to talk about this. Please stop us if you have questions. We're happy to answer as we go along. Next slide. So to borrow from one of my favorite children's authors, Where the Sidewalk Ends, Shel Silverstein wrote about a place where the grass grows soft and white, a place the children know. Next slide. But too often, what we see where the sidewalk ends looks more like this. It's not a place to go, but a barrier and a place where we leave pedestrians to fend for themselves. Next. So most people like sidewalks. We recognize their benefits and their utility. It's reflected in property values. Places with sidewalks tend to be more desirable and have higher property values. And people like walkable neighborhoods. They attract investment, neighborhood cohesiveness, interaction. It's a place where people get to know their neighbors. And there's real economic benefits to sidewalks as well. Walking is cheap transportation. If you can walk, your household costs for transportation is less. And sidewalks are relatively inexpensive to build, much cheaper than building roads. So it makes sense for us to invest in walking as well as bikes and transit. If people have the option to walk, even some of the time, it saves them money. And it also saves us money as a community because we don't have to build as many lanes or widen as many streets for cars. Sidewalks also help with equity. Not everyone drives. There's lots of folks, young and old and in between, that aren't able to drive. So sidewalk helps provide a transportation mode for all people. And it turns out that walking and biking is good for you. So we also get a big health dividend. Next. So, however, sidewalks, they only provide value if they connect to things. We have about 220 miles of missing sidewalks in Missoula. That's both sides of the street. So that roughly equates to about a third of our total street miles in the city lack sidewalks. So if you think about it, the sidewalk in front of my house has very little value to me. I get to shovel it, I get to repair it, but the real value is in what it connects to. It's where I can go. So our challenge in thinking about sidewalks is really filling in the gaps. We require sidewalks with new development, 100% paid by the property owner or the buyer. But in many old neighborhoods, they were built without sidewalks, without curbs in many cases. And as those neighborhoods grow and become more dense, that lack of sidewalks becomes more of an issue. And filling in sidewalks creates a cost burden for those existing property owners, not entirely of their own making. So sidewalks are important as density and intensity increases, and new infill development is really driving that demand in our existing neighborhoods. And we all get the benefits of that. We get the benefit of sidewalks as connectivity as a community. So we created a subsidy program to help share that cost. And that program has changed over time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Our strategy for 220 miles is it's a long haul. We typically can build 2 to 4 miles of sidewalk every year. So it's going to take many years to fill in all of those sidewalks. And in some places we may never build sidewalks. They may not be appropriate. Where you have lower volumes and less traffic, it's maybe not necessary to have a sidewalk in all cases. So our strategy has been really to identify those primary sidewalk corridors. This was something that Doug Harvey started back in the 90s, looking at a master sidewalk plan and really focusing on primary sidewalks as a network. And more recently, we've shifted from a program basis to more of a project basis, where we're identifying specific corridors and complete street projects and tying those to specific outcomes and priorities in our strategic planning. And really looking to address those complete street needs, curb, gutter, sidewalk, drainage, traffic calming, as well as green infrastructure, and a big focus on safety, comfort, and that idea of a useful and interesting walk. Next. So council's authority to order sidewalks comes from state law. City council can order sidewalks, curbs, gutters, alley approaches to be constructed in front of any lot or parcel of land. It requires that we notify the landowner, and the owner may choose to construct it themselves, or after 30 days, the city may construct it and assess those costs. And this is further defined in our municipal code in Title 12, which includes the ability to repair and replace sidewalks where deemed hazardous or dangerous to public health and safety by the city engineer. Next. So I'll hand off to Monty here, and he'll take us through some of the current programs and what we've done in the past.
Yeah, thanks. Excuse me. Thanks,
Monty,
Jeremy.
Monty, do you want to take questions as they come up, or would you rather finish the presentation and then take questions?
Please,
Sure, we can take questions.
let's do questions.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see hands up.
Yeah, so Sandra, go ahead.
Thanks. So if the property owner can construct them themselves, can they actually construct them themselves, or do they have to use like a specific company or like a specific concrete or sidewalk company?
Yeah, so the property owner can't construct the improvements in the right of way themselves. They would have to hire a licensed bonded contractor that's approved to do concrete in the right of way.
Okay, thanks.
So anyway, I'm gonna start off talking about some of our current programs. Currently, we have 3 programs that are associated with curb, gutter, and sidewalk installation. The first is our right-of-way special improvements assessment program, which is part of our current CIP projects. This is what we used to term as the curb and sidewalk program. The second program is our hazardous sidewalk program, which addresses sidewalk through citizen complaints that are not in our CIP projects. And then our third program is our annual miscellaneous assessment parcels program, which was established to provide financing options to citizens installing curb and sidewalk improvements outside of our CIP projects. So a little bit about curb sidewalk program history. Prior to 2011, 100% of the construction costs for curb, sidewalk, and associated improvements were assessed to the adjoining property owners. In 2011, the first funding assistance was established, which was for a $750 credit for each ADA curb ramp installed in a project. And that only applied to owner-occupied single-family residential properties. So then in 2012, additional funding assistance was established for city-ordered curb sidewalk projects. This program was established through a subcommittee of Public Works and was based on an insurance model. So the way this worked was the first $1,000 was paid by the city. And after that, then it was a 50-50 split up to a max out-of-pocket of $3,500 for property owners. After that, the city picked up 100% of the cost until the total construction amount reached $15,000. Once that cap was reached, 100% of the cost over $15,000 was assessed back to the property owner. So this applied to all properties, regardless of use or property classification. So that'd be regardless of it was 1, 2-family, multifamily, or commercial industrial. So then in 2017, the program was modified to increase the cap from 15,000 to 20,000, providing for an additional $5,000 of assistance to property owners. This modification was due to increased costs of construction the city was seeing in bids. In 2017, the assessment still pertained to both curb and sidewalk associated improvements. In 2020, the city established our current funding assistance program. The update removed curb gutter, asphalt repair, and associated street improvements from the property owner assessment work. This substantially reduces all property owner assessments from the previous program. In addition, there is now a split funding assistance model, one for 1 and 2-family dwelling, and then another for multifamily commercial industrial properties. I will discuss this further later in the presentation. So the goals of these right-of-way projects is to improve pedestrian and bicycle travel and safety, as Jeremy mentioned, including accessibility for all users, and that's very important. It's also increased neighborhood connectivity. So the funding structure, as previously mentioned, our right-of-way special improvements assessment program is part of our larger CIP projects for established neighborhoods. These projects look to combine goals and objectives when completing projects. The property owner assessment component of these projects only includes sidewalks, approaches, boulevards, and the associated improvements. Property owners are eligible for funding assistance for what was adopted in Resolution 8416 and an admin rule 418, which I will touch on next. So this is our current funding structure for 1 and 2-family dwellings. It shows the current funding model for 1 and 2-family. Once again, the street-related work is no longer part of the assessment component of these projects. City uses other funding to support that construction. So here's an example of that funding structure for 1 and 2-family. This is our Eaton Street Phase 1 project. This is a corner parcel. And so so here's the breakdown of the cost. Total cost on this parcel right here is estimated at just over $19,000. The city funding assistance is about $15,650, and the remaining assessment, it would be the property owner's responsibility is $3,500. So if this corner property included curb gutter and associated asphalt work as part of the assessment component, the total cost would likely have doubled on this parcel. Under that scenario, this property would have hit the cap at $9,000 versus the $3,500 under the current funding assistance.
Monty, we have a question from Daniel. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thanks. I'm actually at the airport today, so just please bear with me with my camera off and stuff. And I've got to wear a mask. But basically, I just wanted to clarify that you can only defer the payment if you are living at a single-family house and if the property owner resides at that property. Is that true?
Yes, the low-income deferral is only for owner-occupied 1 and 2-family dwellings.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sandra.
I guess just a follow-up on the slide that I had my previous question on. So you give the notice to the property owner, and so they only have 30 days to get quotes from multiple companies, get on the company schedule, and get it all completed all in 30 days. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's per state statute. Jeremy mentioned the state statute that authorizes that. And so that is in Montana Code annotated.
Well, I'm going to have to work on getting that changed. Thanks.
Right.
Yep, so thank you. So here's the funding structure currently for multifamily commercial industrial. This funding assistance for these properties did not change from 2017, the previous model, with the exception of the street related work is no longer being assessed. So that's really important. So our assessment process The city has developed a robust public outreach process to inform area citizens of projects. We develop a project-specific web link for each project, including the location, description of the project, benefits, the assumed schedule. We also attach conceptual plans and other pertinent information to that website. We mail out postcards or letters to the neighborhood, providing basic information, including the web link, and informs them of the public or neighborhood meeting process. So after that, prior to bringing the project to City Council, we mail out letter 1. It's mailed out to all properties with an assessment component, and that's usually sent out a week or 2 prior to the scheduled Public Works Committee date for consideration on the resolution to order. This letter provides plans specific to each parcel, estimated quantities of work, and the associated funding assistance and assessment amounts that have been calculated pertinent to that property. So then letter 2 is mailed out after the City Council action to approve the resolution to order. This letter provides additional information pertaining to payment, finance, and deferral options. A reply form is attached to this letter asking property owners how they may want to finance the cost of the assessment portion. If we do not receive a reply upfront at letter 2, we default it to a 20-year assessment. It also provides an option for the property owner to opt out of the project and hire their own contractor to complete the improvements per state statute. That was kind of the question Sandra just had. So then letter 3 is mailed out after project bids have been received and the city has determined the apparent low bidder. This letter provides revised cost estimates based on the low bidder pricing, also provides funding assistance options, the assessment amount, and informs them of future Public Works Committee and City Council dates. The purpose of the resolution, so it's mailed out usually 1 or 2 weeks prior to that Public Works Committee date on the resolution to confirm the order and the bid award. The purpose of the resolution to confirm is to document properties that have chosen to opt out of the project.
Monty, we have a question from Stacy. Go ahead, Stacy.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Monty, for this and Jeremy for the presentation. Super informative. I guess my clarifying question, even though the 30 days, I mean, kind of piggybacking off of what Ms. Vasica asked, the 30 days per state statute seems, you know, anyone who's ever had to try to hire a contractor seems hard. But this, you know, really kind of does show that the process does actually take longer with noticing council meetings, final adoption, low bidder pricing. So if you are somebody who does, you know, want to take this project on yourself, you know, 30 days is in state statute, but in the reality of the actual project, there's a longer period of time. And also one of the things which I'm hoping you'll probably get to is that now that we have sort of started to put together a calendar so we kind of can predict where we're going to go with the next level of sidewalk. So if you are in that master sidewalk plan and you know sidewalks are coming to your area, you might have a little bit more heads up to be able to, you know, if you feel you can do it better and cheaper yourself within the parameters that are required, you have an opportunity to do so. Correct?
Yeah, so the 30 days, once again, it is difficult. That comes from state statute. So to follow through the process, we provide that information up front. We provide the option for them to opt out and hire their own contractor. And then if they in fact do that, then we document in the resolution to confirm the order. It documents that they were in the original resolution and they've been dropped from the project. And so that's how it's documented. The trick is getting that work done prior to our contractor coming onto the site, because we don't want overlapping contractors. And so in addition, with our larger projects, you get it's kind of economy of scale, I have to say. You know, doing a larger area project, the bids are usually lower than they would be on a parcel by parcel basis. And if they do opt out of the project, they are not eligible for the funding assistance, the subsidy. The reason for that is we can't manage a private contract and apply subsidy outside of our program.
That
Okay,
absolutely makes sense. And I do realize, yeah, it does seem the economy of scale of like, we're doing a whole block sidewalk versus just a parcel. So thanks for that.
all right. Jeremy and then Amber.
Thanks. I think Monty covered that. I was going to point out the economy of scale. I think in most cases, it makes more sense for property owners to work through our program and take advantage of the subsidy rather than doing it themselves. There may be cases where we have to order a repair replacement that it might make sense for them to go out and do it themselves, or if it's just a small amount of sidewalk without curb and gutter work or drainage work or other things that have to happen with the street.
Amber?
Yeah, thanks. Monty, I was going to ask about the subsidies, so I appreciate you pointing that out. If they opt out, that they don't have the option for that. I'm just curious. So that was really my question that you answered, but I'm curious, how often do people opt out? I mean, is this something? Can you give me some sense of? Doesn't seem like it's as good of a plan, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, I honestly can't recall the last time somebody's opted out of a project. You know, we used to have a small, maybe a handful at most, that would opt out of a larger project, would be anywhere from 60 to 100 parcels. But I haven't really seen that in the last 10 plus years. Okay, so I'm going to jump back in if we have no further questions. So letter 4 is mailed out after the city council action on the resolution to confirm the order and the associated bid award. It provides additional information regarding the award contractor who actually is going to do the work, and also provides estimated start and end dates for the construction. So then we have letter 5. Letter 5 is mailed out once the construction work has been completed. It provides final cost information based on measurements in the field. And it provides, once again, a choice to change the default or the payment, or however they chose to do up in letter 2. So it provides an option if they said they wanted to assess it over 20 years up front in letter 2, we don't lock them into that. We provide the as-built information, so then they have an accurate cost, and then they can choose to stay with that or change their method of payment. They could pay cash or change it to an 8 or 12 year, or even qualify for a low income deferral if they request. This letter also may include information to property owner for the care of their new improvements, including de-icing agents on new concrete. De-icing agents are really not good on new concrete. So we provide information out to property owners, because they are responsible for maintenance, to use something in lieu of de-icing agents for those first 2 years, kitty litter, sand, or something like that. And it also provides information on boulevard maintenance. So once we do establish these improvements, they then have a developed boulevard where they typically wouldn't have before. So we provide information on boulevard maintenance. So then letter 6, which is the final letter in the process, is mailed out from the city clerk's office after the bonds are sold. So this only pertains to the assessment parcels. You know, if somebody pays cash at the end of the project, they wouldn't receive this letter 6. This is information provided to property owners. And what it does is it provides the bond interest rate, the interest rate at the time of the bond sale, the total amount to assess. And it also explains when property owners will start seeing the assessment show up on their tax bill. So current projects. So Eden Street Phase 1 resolution to order was presented to council in January. This project is currently out to bid and may be back to council in April for confirmation or a bid award. So there's some cost information provided in the slide, number of properties. Out of the 66 properties in this project, based on our engineer's estimate, the highest assessment for any of these properties is $3,500. So this slide shows how to calculate a monthly payment per $1,000 of work for a $3,500 assessment with a 20-year term. The approximate first year monthly payment for a $3,500 assessment over 20 years would be $35 a month, or $210 semi-annually. These are simple interest loans, so the monthly semi-annual payments would reduce each year until the loan is paid off. So this calculation methodology is also shown in letters 2 and 5 that we send out. So here's that same calculation for a $9,000 assessment, which is the cap for 1 to 2 family for 20 years. So the approximate first year monthly payment for a $9,000 assessment over 20 years would be $90 a month or $540 semi-annually. Once again, they're simple interest loans, so those reduce as they're paying the payments off. So another one of our current projects is Turner Warden, Scott Street to Stoddard North 5th. And this project is in the early design stages. We've mailed out postcards to the neighborhood and held 2 public meetings in December on this project. We estimate bringing this project to Public Works Committee and City Council for consideration on the resolution to order in April or May. So in our second program, oh, so one more, sorry. So Ivory Franklin Park is another current project we're working on. This is in the early design stages as well. We're planning a neighborhood meeting on phase 1 of this project in late spring. And this kind of depicts phase 1 of the project. It's from 4th Street down Ivy, Franklin down to Short Amount. So phase 1 of the project will likely be brought to Public Works Committee in the fall of 2022 for consideration on the resolution to order. So our second program is our Hazardous Sidewalk program. This program, its provisions are contained in Missoula Municipal Code Chapter 1210 right-of-way improvements. These are initiated by citizen complaint, and the city has developed a process to receive complaints, investigate, notify property owners, and have repairs completed. Sometimes surface engineering is notified of hazardous sidewalks where somebody tripped or fell with injury through the city attorney's office and MMIA, who's our insurance provider. So any property owner that makes repairs to hazardous sidewalk are eligible for the city financing and the deferred loans, but they're not eligible for the subsidy. So our third program is our annual miscellaneous assessment parcels program. And this is properties that install curb and sidewalk related improvements outside of our larger CIP projects. They included improvements initiated by private development or hazardous sidewalk complaints or voluntary installations that want to make use of the city's financing. Once again, these are not eligible for the subsidy. So throughout the year, surface engineering coordinates with property owners that would want to finance work to obtain assessment agreements and itemized invoices from their contractors. Once all work is complete, the work is inspected and the permits are closed out. The necessary documentation is received and recorded. And then at that time, the city pays the contractor on the property owner's behalf. So then at the end of each year, we bring a single miscellaneous parcels resolution to order to Public Works Committee and Council to formalize the assessment so that it can be included in the bond sale. I'm going to turn it back over to Jeremy.
Thanks, Monty. So budget and funding. Council sets the budgets for these projects through the capital improvement program. That's part of our annual budget process. You'll see 4 different categories in those transportation CIPs. The sidewalks and mobility program, that's where these sidewalk projects fall. We also have a program for roadway improvements, parks projects, and federal aid projects that you'll see in those CIPs. We've been working to prioritize and recommend projects based on a specific set of criteria. And these are listed here below. Plan conformity plan conformity refers to how well the project supports adopted plans and policies. Connectivity gets at making connections to other facilities like greenways or bus routes or trails. Access is how well the project provides access to key destinations like schools or parks, business areas. Safety is how well the project addresses identified safety concerns. And because council was very interested in safety as well as equity, we weight those 2 criteria with a 2 times scoring factor so that they have a higher emphasis in our priorities. Equity addresses underserved neighborhoods, development impacts, affordable housing, vulnerable populations, things like that. Leverage refers to how well the project builds on recent or upcoming projects, whether or not it can support redevelopment or other city goals, how well it leverages other potential funding sources. And readiness just refers to how far along the project is have we done planning and feasibility? Have we addressed other jurisdictions, agency approvals, or other project constraints? Next. So funding for the sidewalk programs comes through typically the road district, and also these other sources, the Bridge and Road Safety Accountability Act. This is the gas tax that we get, BARSA. We've also been able to use transportation impact fees in some cases for sidewalks, as well as complete street projects. MRA is doing a lot of work with tax increment financing, building sidewalks. This is a whole separate program where they are doing sidewalk build out in the urban renewal districts. And then property assessments, as we've been talking about, that makes up a portion of the funding. And I think it's important to understand that in a project like Eaton, for example, assessments only make up 10% of the total project cost. So the bulk of the costs on these projects is coming from other city funding sources, either road district, which is intended to help subsidize those sidewalk costs, or these other funding sources which are really being applied to the other work that has to happen in a complete street project. So the curb and gutter, the drainage facilities, the pavement, all those other associated things that we want to include in a complete street, so that when we're all done, we have a complete facility and there's not other work that we need to come back and do. Next slide. So how much does the city have budgeted for sidewalks each year? Our current program, we're funding about $430,000 out of the road district towards the sidewalk program. So that really is where we have the subsidy. And if you use the formula of approximately a third of the sidewalk work is part of assessments, that would get $142,000 of assessment work. And so rough budget of $572,000 for sidewalks. So our target is $1 million. We'd like to be doing $1 million of sidewalk work every year. So that would mean increasing the road district subsidy to $700,000 and assessing about $300,000. So we haven't been able to get to that level over the past 2 years. We've been at the $430,000 level. And we've supplemented that with BARSA and impact fees to help make up the difference in order to get to complete projects. So ideally, we'd add about $270,000 to the road district to fully fund the sidewalk subsidy. Next. So that's what we have. Happy to continue the conversation and take some questions. I see Gwen has her hand up.
Go ahead, Gwen.
Thanks. If you could just go back a slide or so, I just wanted to clarify so that I'm clear in my mind. You were saying that with the Eaton project, approximately 10% of that project came from assessments. But when I look at this slide, it looks like more than 10% is coming from assessments. Was that just the nature of how it unfolded on Eaton with the individual lots there, or did I mishear?
I'll let Monty clarify that.
Yeah, so what this slide is depicting is what we currently have structured for the assessment component of the work. So as Jeremy mentioned, there's a lot more work that goes into these projects to make it complete above the sidewalk. So what this slide is depicting is the assessment component of that project, which is basically the sidewalk, the driveway approaches, boulevard improvements, and so forth. So it's just it's about a third of the overall project, and so that's just breaking out the subsidy. So that 572 is the assessment about when you run the subsidy, they're picking up about 430 of it, and so the 142 is what's being picked up by the property owner.
Okay, thank you.
That's about a 35-65 split or a 30-70. But that doesn't include everything that we put into these projects, all the street component work.
So in other words, the follow-up, Chair?
Please, go ahead.
So when you're talking about curb and gutter and all of that, that adds on more to the formula than the entire cost. And we're just looking at sidewalks here, just to clarify.
All right, yeah, so this slide depicts the assessment component, but $1 million of assessment work would relate to about $3 million for the overall project.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Daniel, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering what the criteria is to meet the low income criteria to defer.
Yeah, so our low income
just curious.
deferral is we use the HUD standards, low income standards, and it's the 80th percentile of the median income for the Missoula metropolitan statistical area. So those come out annually, and so it breaks out what those qualifications, the income level based on a family of 1 up through like 5. And so if somebody requests this information on that, we have an application and we provide the HUD criteria. And there's an application that they fill out and we review that we qualify them for that program.
Great. Any other questions? Amber.
I don't actually have a question. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you bringing this forward, Mirta. I think it's really interesting. I mean, I had some sense of it, but putting it all together, excuse me, is just really helpful. So thank you, Jeremy and Monty, for bringing this.
Yeah, I appreciate Monty and Jeremy putting all this information together to provide some clarity and provide some history really about how sidewalk projects have been funded throughout the history of Missoula really, and how much progress we have made in both the funding and also putting in the infrastructure. As Jeremy said, we have a good chunk of sidewalk of our city missing sidewalks, and it's gonna take a long time to fill those gaps. And they're important to our transportation system. So finding a way to move along with putting in sidewalk is really important for so many reasons. Okay, we have a few more hands up. Gwen, go ahead.
Thanks. So during my time on council, I think there has been a paradigm shift in terms of our sidewalk program, not only with the funding, but also with where we are implementing it. And that's what I'd like you to discuss a little bit. I mean, when I started on council, and this is a generalization, but in general, I think Doug Harvey was kind of focusing on the inner core and building that out and then moving out from there. And then we really took a step back and created this master sidewalk plan where we focused more on equity and how to get sidewalks into maybe areas that were not necessarily in the immediate urban core, which Ward 3 has a lot of urban core. So that's why we were like, maybe we need to shift off of Ward 3 to a degree. And if you could just talk through that thought process and how you approached figuring out how to put sidewalks in underserved areas and why that was important.
Yeah, thanks. I can speak to that. So we did in doing the criteria and looking at those areas that are experiencing a lot of infill development in their neighborhoods that didn't have the sidewalk infrastructure. We tried to line up projects that would help address some of those underserved areas and also just looking at projects a little bit more geographically to make sure that we weren't putting all of our resources into just one neighborhood, recognizing that all neighborhoods need attention. And so we need to use a little bit of subjectivity in the way we make recommendations to make sure that we're spreading those resources equitably throughout the city as well. So it was definitely something that was high in our thought process in terms of thinking about how to address those needs. And then I think also looking at those critical corridors, thinking about the connectivity and how filling in a corridor with sidewalk connectivity really provides that transportation connection, and it's not just an isolated sidewalk project that doesn't connect other things.
Follow up.
Good.
So yes, thank you for that. I think that's exactly what was contemplated by staff and council when there was a big pivot shift about 4 years ago. And I feel like we hear the word connectivity all the time. And then sometimes it's good to take a step back and like, what does that really mean? And my understanding is it's like, we've got a neighborhood. Where are the parks? Where are the schools? Where are the commercial centers? Where's the bus stops? If you could talk a little bit about that concept of how you prioritize what's important, where are people going to be walking? And then if you could discuss greenways also, because I think that's part of this conversation. And I think it's important to articulate what a greenway is.
So we've done some very good planning around non-motorized transportation, and we relied on those plans to help steer us to these recommendations for projects. The Greenway system has actually been one of the really good tools we've had, because we recognize that in developing these greenways, and for those that don't know what I mean by greenway, it's a street that is really designed and intended to accommodate bikes and pedestrians as well as cars in a more equal manner. So they're low speed, low traffic, very high pedestrian accommodation. And what we found is that those greenway corridors were designed in a way that they connected key things. They connected things like the university to downtown, or schools to parks, or neighborhoods to hospitals or work centers. So it was a good guideline, and we've focused a lot of our current sidewalk work on those greenway corridors to try to build out that connectivity in that way.
Thank you.
Great question. Great answer. Heidi, go ahead.
So I was trying to find the document that replaced the sidewalk plan, and I can't remember what it's called. So I'm having a hard time tracking it down. But I thought maybe it could be attached as informational material. I remember it being one of the best plans I've seen for our community. And it's a really good read, even though I can't remember the name of it. And I recommend anyone who's new to council really take a look at it, because I think it does represent a shift in how we decide where projects go and for what reasons, with the emphasis on both safety and equity. And yeah, I thought this was really exciting when it came to council a while ago, and I just recommend people review it.
Yep. I could jump in on that. So it's our pedestrian facilities master plan.
That's what it's called.
And so that was presented to council. We went through a lot of effort with transportation planning on that, and that plan was adopted just prior to our 2020 revisions to the funding assistance program. So I believe in 18 or 19 is when that was adopted. There's also a bicycle facilities master plan out there, and obviously a lot of long range transportation plan goals and objectives that kind of tie into our programs here that I identified today.
Thanks for that, Monty. I was gonna ask Aaron Wilson to remind us what some of those documents are. So Daniel, go ahead.
Thanks. So I just wanted to bring up the conversation about how this relates to affordable housing in Missoula. About 50% of our city rents, and I'm really concerned that when we put a large cost of sidewalks onto homeowners, that they just push that cost onto rents for renters. And we're only really assessing people for, it looked like $140,000 last year, or just a couple $100,000 a year. So I'm just wondering, and often this can be a big financial burden for either the renters with their rent going up from a sidewalk, or for the homeowners that are financially burdened. And I was just wondering if there's much of an appetite for us to just eat that cost like in the general budget and still build the same amount of sidewalks or more. But instead of putting that cost on the homeowners in the future, I'm just wondering if there's much of an appetite to just fully fund sidewalks in our general fund, and if there's any concern from other people about how this might raise rent with the current system.
Are the hands up in relation to this question? Okay, let's just keep, well, I'm gonna put that on my tickler, Daniel, because I think it's a good point, but it's part of a larger conversation, and I think it touches on equity and several other aspects related to housing as well. Let's go ahead and take Mike's question.
Yeah, my question's separate, but I would say that question from Daniel's an interesting conversation. But if we don't fund it through assessments and it comes from the general fund, that's property taxes. So we'd have to cut somewhere else. I mean, I just think that one way or another, that cost is going on homeowners. So it's something to consider. And obviously, you know, when we do new construction, we expect the developer to pay for it all themselves. So those homeowners are carrying the full cost. Just pointing those things out. My question was more on, this is a topic that I've actually emailed city staff on prior to being on council. My understanding is if an individual property is being annexed into the city for whatever reason, whether it's they're hooking up to sewer and they're being required to because they're in the annexation area, whatever, conditions are put on those annexations, including often sidewalks and gutters and things like that. And those properties are not eligible for the payment plans. Is that accurate? And kind of, if so, can anybody talk about the rationale for that?
I'll take a start at that. So I'm not immediately involved in the annexations and the conditions that are stipulated on those. And I guess it depends on if we're annexing a large area. If we're talking about individual properties that are being annexed, I think once they were in the city, they could complete that construction if it was a requirement, and they could certainly make use of our finance option. So, you know, it's part of the almost like a voluntary, or anybody with a building permit requirement to install curb and sidewalk at a parcel level can make use of our financing. So they would be eligible to coordinate with me and assess that work over an 8, 12, or 20-year term. And then those parcels would be rolled into what I explained as our miscellaneous parcel order at the end of each year.
So once they're annexed in, that you're saying that option would be available to them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Heidi.
So I wanted to mention a couple of things. One thing I think that wasn't included in the presentation, but also triggers the installation of sidewalks. Obviously new construction does, but I believe if you add 200 square feet of like footprint in a remodel, that also would trigger having to add a sidewalk. My house didn't quite meet that requirement, but I decided to add sidewalk anyway and went through the whole process of financing my sidewalk installation through the city. So it was a great process to walk through because now I can explain how it works to people. And I wanted to briefly touch on the affordable housing conversation. I've personally worked with the sidewalk program, but also when I was working for the NMCDC, one of our developments had an SID to pay for the installation of sidewalk during construction. And so the entire, essentially after it was constructed, the HOA was responsible for, or individual homeowners within the HOA were responsible for paying, you know, over a course of, I think it was financed over 20 years, the sidewalk installation. And so it does, I think there's definitely ways to make that infrastructure upgrade affordable over the long term and factor it into the cost of housing. I think the benefit is so great. You know, I'm stuck right now with a broken foot at my house, and my sidewalk ends at either end of my property. And it really, you know, it's a deterrent to be able to go anywhere, you know, or even ride the bus, which I usually do, but I can't really get to the bus stop. So I think there are trade-offs and costs, but I think that it opens up opportunity for savings in other places too. So it is a big conversation, but I don't think it's as big of a hit as one would assume over the course of paying it off.
Yeah. Amber, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And I think Heidi touched on some of what I was going to say, but you know, I think sidewalks are so important as an equity issue, and whether it's Heidi with a broken foot or my mom that's in a wheelchair, I mean, it can be a huge impediment to getting around, getting to the bus stop, getting, you know, really getting any place, and it's a giant safety issue for kids. So we're not necessarily talking about that piece with the comments, but you know, I think I'm saying a little bit what Mike said as well. I think that Daniel's question is really interesting and, you know, is a much larger conversation. But then there's the question of with new construction, we're requiring them to pay for the sidewalks. And if we put it in the general fund, we're just making everyone in the city pay for the sidewalks, right? So it's not like, you know, there's some fund that doesn't come out of property taxes. It's still property taxes. And then another question that I think about is it does increase the value of the home. So does that make sense that we spread it around to the entire city when it's increasing the value of that specific property? Someone's sharing their screen in a way they might not want to. I think, Jeremy, I think you're sharing your email with us. So I just want to make sure.
Monty, I think you should stop sharing. There you go.
Okay.
There we go.
I didn't know who that was. Okay, just wanted to point that out. But I mean, I think it's always an interesting conversation of where the balance is. I've been impressed as I've learned more being on council about the sidewalk program, and I love having it all kind of put together in this presentation today, as I said, just about how much thought and work there has gone into making this an equitable program, a program that people you know, have good options for spreading it out over a long period of time. So while I appreciate the affordable housing conversation always, you know, I think there's a lot of questions around just putting it into the general fund and giving sidewalks to everyone, because it could be we're gonna have to make other choices to cut things.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. As I was just listening to the comments, I wanted to add just a couple of thoughts, and that is that, you know, we can't, it's a complex issue, and we can't just assume that renters are taking an unfair hit with, you know, the cost of sidewalk installation, because we need to assume that renters are elderly people, are children, are people with disabilities, all of whom benefit and need this important piece of the infrastructure in our community. So, you know, trying to have all of it paid for by the city with everyone's property taxes raises another issue of fairness and equity. So I think it's an interesting question, and I appreciate it, but I think it has a really complex answer. Gwen, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, to just briefly wrap up on the topic, I think it's a really good question to ask and a complicated conversation. And a lot of good points were made, but I do come back to, I think rents are one factor in determining rents, are costs such as property taxes, mortgages, et cetera. But honestly, I think a bigger factor is demand. it is a business driven vehicle, and that is, I think, demand raises rents more than these other costs, especially if it's sidewalks and it can be spread out over 20 years and it's very, very small every month. So I also just wanted to point out that over the last 10 years, as we started the sidewalk subsidy, we really, really greatly increased it this last in 2020 when it was revisited. And that I think it's in a good place now. And I think we need to give it a few years to play out and see what happens with concrete costs and contractors and see. We're in such a state of flux right now. We first of all, we need to get it back to some kind of normal. And then I think our formula that we've got is actually a really good equation, and we need to let it work out, and noting that people who are able to benefit from our sidewalk program and the formula, their property value does go up. So there is a fairness there that needs to be acknowledged. The other thing I wanted to say was, I know that we did not have someone from the Invest in Health program to present today, but, and maybe Aaron can speak to it, but for people who aren't familiar, there was a really big grant to really look at some of our underserved neighborhoods and see what in terms of health would make big impacts, and sidewalks were one of them. So really getting these into those neighborhoods is very important on so many different levels. And anyway, I just wanted to note that this is such a big topic. We could go on for hours, but the Invest in Health topic is also noteworthy.
Yep. And we are going to be almost out of time, but Jordan, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really glad that Gwen mentioned the Invest Health study. I remember seeing a really striking graphic or map that showed health outcomes on a slide along with sidewalk deficiency. And I mean, it was striking. It was the same neighborhoods that have less quality infrastructure for non-motorized transportation have poorer health outcomes, and obviously there's a lot of factors that determine health outcomes, and certainly poverty is a big part of that. But I really appreciate the way that we've been able to pivot to an equity-driven approach to putting in sidewalks. The one thing that always occurs to me too is with sidewalks or bike lanes, or honestly most prominently with sidewalks and transit, is that we make investments in sidewalk and we make investments in transit because those have the opportunity to improve the quality of life for residents who maybe don't have the means and can't afford other modes of getting around the community. So we have people who walk and take transit as a choice. They have a car in the driveway. We have a lot of people who walk and take transit because it's their only option. And so I am really supportive of investing in those options to improve those in order to improve access and mobility and quality of life for everyone in our community.
Thanks for that. Yes, I agree. We are out of time, and I just want to once again say thank you to Monty and Jeremy for bringing all this information. And I'm sure that if any council members have further questions, you can send them to either Jeremy or Monty for further clarification. As Gwen said, this is a big topic, and if we need to revisit at some point, we can do that. But for now, I hope this was helpful to you all in understanding the importance and the funding mechanisms that we have in place to put this infrastructure in place one bit at a time. So with that, we would be adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.